If there's any story in the Bible that the world does not want to believe it's true, it has to be the story of Sodom and Gomorrah.
It shouldn't exist. By every law of physics and logic, it should have been gone, disintegrated, swallowed by the crushing, corrosive deep. But it does exist. We're talking about a camera, a relic from 1912, recently recovered from the abyssal depths where the Titanic rests. This wasn't just any artifact. This was a silent witness, a frozen moment from a century ago, a recorder of the unspeakable. But here's where the impossible begins. The camera wasn't found amidst the wreck. It was discovered nearly half a mile away, buried under thick sediment, as if something or someone had deliberately placed it there. The team that pulled it from the darkness felt a profound unease immediately. Experts were nervous. Some were terrified. This was no ordinary find, because whatever this camera saw didn't want to be found. This was the silent witness to an impossible event. Months of painstaking restoration turned back the clock. The few surviving pictures were almost ready to be seen, but a deep internal conflict gripped the research team. The fragile film presented an ethical dilemma. Should they expose such a haunting record, or leave its secrets buried forever? A captain's vote sealed its fate. 6 in favor, 6 against. His final decision, made after a sleepless night, was to develop the film. Whatever chilling mysteries the camera held, they were going to be revealed, and the final critical frames. Date, April 15th, 1912, 2:17 a.m. The precise moment the Titanic vanished under the waters went tragically unnoticed by the crew as they began the procedure. This was the cursed film. The camera sat installed on an examination table, its presence filling the room like an unwanted guest. The glow of LED lights buzzed around the research vessel's laboratory. They had locked it in a climate-controlled container, ensuring ideal humidity and temperature to prevent any further deterioration. The film within was the real enigma. Celluloid, which by every known scientific principle ought to have dissolved into nothingness after over a century, submerged in salt water. Yet, there it was, coiled inside its metal spool, its emulsion astonishingly unaffected by the relentless march of time. A silent strain permeated the room, as if the air itself had thickened with the sheer impossibility of its survival. The first technician to attempt extraction, his gloved hands trembling slightly, tried to operate the camera's mechanism. The latch resisted initially, then finally gave way with a grudging click that echoed ominously in the quiet laboratory. The film was tightly coiled on an unbroken reel, but as the technician cautiously attempted to unwind it, the spool suddenly locked, as if an unseen force had gripped it from within. On the second try, there was only a brittle breaking sound, and then rust-colored flakes were strewn across the gleaming stainless steel table. But this was no ordinary corrosion. The particles clung to one another in strange, apparently intentional patterns, forming jagged lines that unsettlingly resembled letters or symbols. Gazing at the bizarre shapes, the technician flinched. Dr. Eleanor Voss, the chief archivist, her face white in the stark glare of the lab, stepped forward. She had worked with innumerable artifacts from marine catastrophes, but nothing compared to this. This was not mere deterioration. It was a residue, a trace of something. That had gotten into the film itself. The digital forensics nightmare began. Scanners flickered with interference, displaying a torrent of error warnings until a distorted preview finally emerged, a blur of shadows that could have been human forms, or simply malevolent tricks of light. As the night wore on, the team's exhaustion mounted. Every effort to save the film produced increasingly bizarre outcomes. Through laborious digital forensics, the film's metadata was extracted, revealing incomprehensible timestamps and moments when the shutter seemed to have been pressed repeatedly for minutes at a time, as if the photographer had been frantically recording something unthinkable. By daybreak, Dr. Voss had seen enough, stopping the proceedings abruptly. Overnight, the rust patterns had become shockingly clear. Under a microscope, the film's first truly clear frame was finally revealed after it was half unraveled. A warped close-up of a ship's railing, but the timing was what drained all sound from the room. April 15th, 1912. It is 2:20 a.m., 3 minutes after the Titanic's last plunge. This was not the camera of a modern-day traveler who loved vintage devices. This camera had been on board the Titanic during its fateful journey and had somehow endured a whole century of crushing pressure, relentless salinity, and corrosive rust before its impossible discovery. Miraculously, the film had survived too. Not all of it, but enough. "This is no miracle," Dr. Voss whispered, shaking her head, her hands trembling slightly as she sealed the film in an archival sleeve. She wrote one word in large, red characters on the container as the others watched in silent dread. Cursed. The search for the photographer began, leading to a chilling vanishing act. According to the ship's manifest, Daniel Whitaker, a 28-year-old London journalist traveling in second class, was listed as the sole potential owner of such a camera. His name was neatly inked on the passenger list, but after April 15, 1912, it disappeared from all records. No assignment to a lifeboat. No testimonies from survivors. Hundreds of bodies were later rescued from the icy Atlantic, but not a single one was identified as his. The instant the Titanic slipped beneath the waves, Daniel Whitaker simply vanished. In 1987, a degraded leather bag was salvaged from the wreckage, and inside, Whitaker's notebook. Its early pages contained mundane observations about the voyage, the quality of the food, the temperament of his cabin mates, until the very final entries. There, the handwriting grew jagged, the ink smeared, as if penned quickly or under immense frantic pressure. The final line, scrolled in the margin as if added at the absolute last possible moment, read, "The ship has hit an iceberg. I must chronicle it. I am taking photos. God protect me." There was no more explanation, no trace of the chaos that immediately transpired. Only those chilling words, followed by an agonizing emptiness. Forensic research later found small indentations on the remaining paper of the journal. These were the ghostly pressure imprints of words scribbled with such desperate power that they left impressions even after the original pages were taken out. Whitaker's cabin was located near the second-class promenade, providing him with an excellent view of the approaching iceberg. Yet, no survivor ever recalled seeing a journalist with a camera that night. Nobody remembered him aiding on the lifeboats or battling the surging crowds. Daniel Whitaker seemed to have stepped out of history the instant he clicked the shutter on that first terrifying shot. The camera's serial number was a match. Data from Kodak's 1912 shipments showed one item sold to a D. Whitaker on Fleet Street. But when researchers scoured London's newspaper archives, they found no record whatsoever of any journalist with that name operating in 1912. No bylines, no job records, nothing. Only a single disintegrating press pass was discovered nestled. Within the diary, its portrait fading to a fog of gray where Whitaker's face should have been. The lab workers, examining the camera more closely, noticed a subtle, unsettling irregularity in the viewfinder. At certain angles, under particular lighting, the glass appeared to carry a faint afterimage of a human standing just outside the frame. The distortion was always in the same spot, always present, as if whatever had imprinted itself on the viewfinder had been standing there, observing for an unimaginably long time. Then came the true horror. The first recovered shot, painstakingly restored, showed the ship's clock reading 11:40 p.m., the precise moment of impact. And reflected in the lens, just barely visible at the composition's edge, was a fuzzy, indistinct figure. Daniel Whitaker had gotten his story, after all. He just never lived to tell it. But the secrets of this impossible camera went far beyond its origins or its vanished owner. The data itself screamed anomalies. The servers at the restoration lab crashed 3 times before the first viable scan finally concluded. What should have been a straightforward digital transfer from century-old film to contemporary archives devolved into a week-long battle with damaged data and mysterious system failures. The film itself seemed to defy every traditional preservation technique. Chemical baths left behind weird, inexplicable residues. Infrared scans returned warped wavelengths as if scanning empty space. High-resolution sensor arrays detected anomalies that simply shouldn't exist on physical media. Cho, the senior archivist, meticulously chronicled each and every failure. The film's base layer revealed no substantial degradation, but the emulsion responded entirely unexpectedly to typical development solutions. Under the microscope, the silver halide crystals, instead of the random degeneration predicted from saltwater exposure, had created remarkable geometric patterns, perfect concentric circles radiating from each sprocket hole. It was as if the film itself was trying to communicate. The digital team hit a wall of bizarre issues. File transfers would appear to finish smoothly, yet the photos would then mysteriously appear rotated 180 degrees in the final output. Metadata tags displayed inaccurate dates, chillingly including timestamps from future calendar years. But most concerning were the file sizes. Each scan, regardless of content or quality, took up exactly 47.47 megabytes of storage space. And when compressed, they all amounted to exactly 191.2 kilobytes, a figure that corresponded to no known file format standards. Dr. Voss identified the most profoundly unsettling abnormality during waveform analysis. The digital scans included an additional picture layer completely imperceptible to the human eye, a weak but chillingly consistent pulse of data that occurred every 2 minutes and 20 seconds. When extracted and amplified, these pulses produced a perfect sine wave at 17.12 Hz, a frequency with no known photographic correlation, but one that marine seismologists instantly recognized as the resonance frequency of the Titanic sinking. Sight, a direct vibrational echo from the abyss. The camera's underlying mechanism posed its own perplexing mystery. X-rays confirmed that all moving parts were undamaged, yet the frame counter indicated it had taken exactly 47 exposures, a figure that matched no known film type from 1912. More troubling still was the shutter speed, which was stuck at an impossible 1/47th of a second. Kodak had never produced shutters with that specific calibration. This camera was an enigma, a puzzle made of impossible pieces. Unexpected, inexplicable, horrifying, but undeniably real. The world held its breath as the first photos flickered onto the press conference screens. Months of painstaking digital restoration had somehow turned back time, exposing what no living person had ever witnessed: the Titanic's last moments, captured through the eyes of a tragic spectral passenger. The earliest images impressed with their deceptive normality. Children played shuffleboard on the deck, their cheeks glowing with laughter in the middle of a game that would soon end in horror. A young girl's hair flowed sideways, caught in a breeze that no longer existed. Nearby, a woman delicately held a basket of Irish lace, her body bending slightly as the deck began its first, almost imperceptible tilt. The lace flew over the basket's edge, transforming an ordinary moment into something spectacular and unspeakably tragic, because both the woman and the lace would vanish beneath the Atlantic in mere minutes. Then came the chilling close-up of the ship's magnificent clock, its hands permanently stuck at 2:17. The image's sharpness was unnatural, piercing. Every tiny scratch on the brass face was excruciatingly clear, as if the camera had somehow focused through the mounting pandemonium to capture time's final, desperate breath. The photographs of the grand staircase drained the oxygen from the room. Crystal chandeliers, suspended at impossible, drunken angles that physics should not allow, their prisms capturing light from an unknown, perhaps otherworldly source. One shot depicted the A-deck landing with water already lapping at the lowest stairs. The reflection in the glossy mahogany paneling revealed warped human forms clinging desperately to the railing above, their figures distorted by the rising flood, something the camera had not directly recorded, only captured in an eerie mirrored echo. The sight of the lifeboats was particularly frightening. Boat number 14 swung at a precarious, drunken angle, its ropes partially severed. Faces peered skyward, not in outright terror, but in something far worse: dawning, horrifying realization. One woman's lips formed a perfect, silent "oh." Her gloved fingers pressed against her cheeks in an involuntary gesture of utter shock. A crewman's arm stretched desperately toward the camera, whether in warning or supplication, no one could tell. Then, the camera, now undeniably in the hands of Daniel Whitaker, lurched into an unspeakable nightmare. The first frames depicted passageways seen from bizarre, high elevations. A door swung on its hinges, revealing a cabin with water-covered portholes. Then the view exploded onto the deck, the initial chaos devolving into heartbreaking individual tragedies. A man frantically attempting to grab a lifebelt from a locked cabinet. Two mothers straining with desperate, impossible strength to keep their children above the rising tide. The camera swung with startling speed to face the churning water. A dark, towering wall of water rushed across the deck, devouring everything in its path. Before the lens impacted the water, a hand, indistinct but undeniably human, stretched down into the frame. Whether to aid or to mimic a final futile gesture of help, no one knew. Next came nothing but bubbles and impenetrable darkness. And then, unbelievably, one more image. The Titanic's surface, shockingly, viewed from below where the mass of the ship should have been. Only the empty, indifferent ocean looked back. The press conference concluded in a profound, unsettling silence. Nobody had any queries. Everyone remained utterly still, frozen by what they had just witnessed. The last timestamp burned itself into everyone's minds. April 15th, 1912, 2:47 a.m. 3 minutes after the stern of the Titanic had vanished beneath the waves. Nobody should have survived long enough to record those 3 minutes. Experts would later point to the terrifying precision of Whitaker's record. Every photograph highlighted an important, grim fact about the disaster: the passenger's initial. Complacency, the failing protections, and the terrible, undeniable mechanics of the sinking. The timing of the final film matched exactly how long it took air trapped in the stern to keep the wreck floating following submersion. But at that initial, startled instant, just one thing truly mattered. They had just seen a man's death, the actual, irrefutable footage of someone's passing. And somehow, 112 years later, that death felt like it was still occurring. The revelation of this footage sent shockwaves across the entire world. Historians were startled, as the clear, undeniable photographs contradicted long-held ideas about the sinking, including the precise angle of disintegration, the speed of flooding, and the exact moment of the final plummet. Marine engineers, long confident in their meticulously constructed computer models, examined the actual footage bit by frame. The terrible, visceral truth caught in those 47 seconds, rendering their simulations utterly worthless. Laypersons struggled to believe the discovery was real. People fought against the claim with every ounce of logic. How could a frail camera from 1912 survive for more than a century underwater? How had the immense water pressure not utterly destroyed the plastic case, eroded the leather, devoured the delicate film? Nobody had the right answers. Not even the scientists who had recovered the camera and developed the film. They still felt like they were living a dream, or perhaps a waking nightmare. Had they truly discovered such a priceless, horrifying item by sheer, unbelievable chance? How would they go on with their lives now that they had stared death and raw desperation directly in the face? But they weren't the only ones deeply touched by the discovery. Survivors' relatives across the globe grieved anew during news briefings, tears flowing silently. Descendants of the people who appeared in those chilling frames came forward, eager to identify the passengers they had only known as names in history books. They were not just names now. They were mothers, fathers, children, friends, captured in their final, unsuspecting moments, and they were gone forever. But now, never. Truly forgotten. The photos of children playing seconds before the accident, or the Irish lace trader adjusting her wares as the deck subtly tipped, these seemingly banal moments humanized the tragedy in ways that no wreckage or official report ever could. The footage's raw, first-person perspective spurred global debates over ethical archaeology, with one prominent journalist eloquently writing, "We aren't studying history anymore. We're invading someone's dying moments." Museums around the world hurried to update their exhibitions. The renowned Titanic clock display now had Whitaker's 2:17 photograph mounted beside it, the two watches permanently synced across eras, silent witnesses to time's ultimate stop. Oceanographers reported a staggering 47% rise in diving permit. Applications to the crash site, as if the world suddenly needed to touch the place where such horror unfolded. Psychologists discovered a disturbing new phenomenon, which they termed Titanic syndrome, the inability to interpret past tragedies as abstract occurrences after watching Whitaker's intensely emotional, deeply personal video. Most eerily, the footage's closing moments, which showed nothing but empty ocean where the Titanic should have been, became a cultural shorthand for unexpected absence. The expression 2:17 moment tragically entered the language, representing that terrifying instant when normality vanishes forever. As the camera was finally sealed in its climate-controlled vault, the argument raged on. Had they saved history, uncovering an unparalleled record of a human catastrophe? Or had they crossed a profound, irreversible line, violating the final moments of a man's life and countless others for the sake of a chilling revelation? The answer to that question, however, like the Titanic itself, would remain forever shrouded in the dark. Now, we turn to you. If you had been on that research team, would you have released the footage to the world, knowing it showed people's final moments? Share your reasons with us in the comments below.